thank you very much and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I'm glad you've joined us. I can see that people are continuing to join us, so I'll continue to welcome you. My name's Suzanne Liversidge. I'm the Global Managing Partner of Kennedy's, a law firm, and we're the sponsors of Dive In. And I'm very fortunate to have been invited to moderate this discussion where we're talking about achieving your potential, focusing on women in business. And I've got two superb guests for us to help us guide the way through some questions. And that is Camilla Kampmann. Camilla, who is a non-exec director on the board of AIG Europe. Welcome, Camilla. And Ivy Kusinga, who is the Chief Culture and Talent Officer at Chubb. Good afternoon, Ivy.
Hello.
And I know, because we've already had a chat with these two women, that they are amazing and have some amazing stories to tell you. But just so that you can participate, we're going to talk for about 35 minutes, 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So you will all see the Q&A buttons on the side of your screen. Please do ask questions. We'll try and answer as many as possible. I have to confess, right, my screen is quite small. So I'll have to put my glasses on and lean in because I've realised that the questions are very tiny for me. So I'll have to be doing a bit of this. But I have a backup because women are inventive, right, and creative. So I have a backup that a colleague is going to WhatsApp me the questions as well in case my little eyes don't work today very well. So, but do ask the questions and thank you so much for joining us. Okay, well, let's start. I don't think we can start a discussion like this without probably discussing COVID-19. I don't think we want to focus on it all the time, but let's get it out of the way, okay? Because COVID-19, none of us were prepared for it. None of us knows really what's going to happen, but it has affected each and every one of us, particularly in not only our personal lives, but in business. And as a business leader, it's been a challenging time to get things right. So first of all, I'd probably like to go to you, Camilla. What do you think the issues and challenges have been around COVID-19, and in particular probably for women?
Yeah, I see a lot of challenge because most families has been forced not only to work from home, but their kids is also staying from home. And then I can see that a lot of the female employees are trying to homeschool in the same time they're trying to do their normal job. And if they are in small space, you can suddenly see a kid running through the screen and you can hear yell and people get embarrassed. But I think now that we are so many months in, that people are starting to relax a little bit. We cannot do all, but I do see a lot of stress. On the other hand, I also see the positive signs of this, because suddenly the whole world have been forced to be virtual. So as we were chatting about, a lot of time now is spared from sitting in a car, sitting in a traffic jam. Mm-hmm. So when you have to drive, at least here in Copenhagen, it is like 2 times faster now. And in the same time, we are closer to the kids. So I see a lot of but also advantages that I hope we will bring forward after COVID-19 is handled.
I think that very fair comments, and I think they're universal globally, aren't they? Ivy, some thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is, it's probably important for us not to lose sight of the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had. So I check a map feed, and more than 31 million people have been infected. We've had just under, I think, 180 deaths worldwide and 188 countries of infection. And that says, I think, that COVID-19 is really a non-discriminating pandemic, that all countries, all regions really have been impacted. But because we are really focused on the discussion around women and how to ensure not only our survival, but also hopefully that we can thrive, I really fully would build on what Camilla talked about, that there's been a disparate impact on women I think COVID-19 also has revealed, frankly, disparate impact around social and economic background. So we know that more and more colleagues who don't have the economic means are challenged. But frankly, when you even look at the trend, who the virus has impacted, it actually does impact people who live in communities that have a more challenged infrastructure and less access to health facilities. So that's sort of some of the real realities I think that our employees and our colleagues still contend with. Certainly, I think the global trends mirror the trends that all of us would face in our organization. The positives, again, I think would mirror that, working flexibly has become, I think, a far more accelerated way of living. But the one point that I think was really interesting to point out here is even the adoption of technology. So if you were somebody who avoided technology or just was really lazy about it or really just could not be bothered, like this has really forced the adoption of technology. So all of us have become kind of savvy enough to use WebEx. Many of us are picking up new tools. And I think that bodes very well actually for just remaining relevant and remaining agile.
I think that's right. Just personally, I'm so delighted I've downloaded my background and did it myself. I felt a real sense of achievement that I've managed to download that. From my experience with COVID-19, speaking to some of my female colleagues, I think totally agree with you. The challenge wherever you are in the world, if you're a working mum, is the pressure of having to achieve your targets and goals that you have to do in your day job while schooling and managing the kids. It's meant that people have had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and stop working at that time. And then once you've got the kids to bed, you're working through till midnight. And I think, my response to that from the leadership point of view, we put an email saying, we understand the position and just do your best. It's okay. It's okay to be a working parent, man or woman. It's okay to understand that we've got these challenges because we're all in the same position. It was a real leveler. In my world, we have 2,100 people. All of a sudden, I had 2,100 officers around the world, each with their own issues. So I think getting that message across to our female colleagues that and male colleagues that if you've got the challenges such as the kids, you can only do your best, and your best is always be good enough in those circumstances. And I think that was refreshing to hear for some people. The feedback I got was that's made me feel more secure because I was extremely anxious about it. And I think with that anxiety comes the mental health issues, whether that be socioeconomic or whatever, of being contained at home. So we have wonderful benefits of, like you, I don't have to be on a plane or a train for 5 or 6 hours. I can do so much more. But to balance that with women who are multitaskers as well, in particular, is I find that I'm now working really long hours as well. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting challenge. But I was reading a report by McKinsey this week in relation to the COVID-19, and it was saying that 27% of organisations in one research study had actually stopped any investment in D&I, which I found astonishing. I wonder what your experience has been, particularly through this period of investment in D&I, and why it's so important that investment is kept up, particularly for issues in relation to whether it be gender, race or sexuality or whatever. Can I pass that to Ivy, please?
So I think, I would say that the drivers for the trend that McKinsey is pointing out could be various drivers, but I think there's an obvious one is obviously when businesses are economically challenged. I mean, if you can't keep your doors open, if you can't operate, and your customer base is shrinking or the way you deployed your business is challenged, then of course you have to look at how your operating expenses are impacted. So I think there's a logical business-driven rationale for squeezing a lot of expenses that typically, if things were all equal or even, we would still probably see that investment. So it's regrettable, but I think you cannot, you have to see it, I think, in the context of the economic challenges that I think some businesses are up against. Certainly for Chubb, we are grateful that we remain operational because the business that we're in is about actually securing people in unsecure times, or providing more security for people. So the relevancy of insurance, I think, is very prominent to our customers. And we've been able to remain operational through this whole period. When it comes to D&I, we're actually as committed, if not more committed. So fortunately, we are accelerating our efforts. A lot of what I think is going on for us is twofold, right? You have an employee base that you need to make sure feels listened to, feels attended to, because they are under stresses and feeling a measure of anxiety. So that investment into that employee engagement and making sure people feel productive and taken care of or attended to. But I think around D&I issues, then a little bit like what we were talking, there's some very unique circumstances. Obviously, in the US, we have a very large focus on race and racism. So the social unrest in the external environment is obviously pressing organizations to really do more than they have typically done in these areas. We as an organization have committed to becoming an anti-racist organization that is accelerating how we look at the participation of people from different ethnicities. And so that investment for us is actually being dialed up. We're doubling up on that. And again, I think the social unrest or the economic disparities are probably even squeezing organizations around these issues as well.
I completely agree with that. Camilla, some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking a slight negative because I've seen so many programs in so many companies I've been part of. And to be honest, I have not seen a lot of results. I don't see the candidate going through educational programs, then emerging out as being head of the organization or getting the next promotion. So I've spent a lot of time thinking, what can you do yourself to succeed? And honestly, what I can see is that if you tend to be too faithful to your company and stay 20 years plus, your chance of succeeding is smaller. If you stay in your same line of business and you don't experiment, if you don't go out and get exposure to different lines of business in your young year, especially in your young year, when you get to the position that you want to compete for the next advantage, there's a man who have taken more chances. He has been exposed to 5 different business lines, and then in the end he wins. And I think that we as female needs to take more chances. We tend to stay in the company too long. We tend to stay in the same line of business because we like our colleagues, we like what we are doing. It's scary to take another jump. So I did the same mistakes in my career, and I was so lucky to have a female CFO, Safra Katz, in one of my organizations. And she gave me an offer saying, you keep your global vice president credential, but I want you to change line of business because you're single-minded. Mm-hmm. And I was, and she was right. So I took the chance. It was really, really hard to, and in the same time, I got an even bigger board position. So I got exposure to another industry, not the information technology I've been using my time on. So I want to give that experience to people. Yes, company needs to invest in this and make sure that there's no racism and there's no sexism, that we give a different kind of people a chance. But in the same time, we need to grab our own career, and then we need to take chances because it pays off.
I think that's extremely helpful for both of you. I mean, summarising that, it's as businesses and as leaders in business, we can't leave it to individuals and say, just fend for yourselves and see what you can do. But as individuals, we can then take advantage of opportunities and do more around that. I mean, going back to Ivy's discussion on D&I, we've had a similar reaction in our organisation. Rather than cut back, we've decided to invest more because we've seen that with COVID-19, it can highlight issues in relation to for women. If we've talked about the socio-economic aspects of it, the mental health aspects of it, and so there's never a better time. And we've seen now, haven't we, through this time, how we were able to communicate much easier through WebEx or whatever it may be. More people are joining into information sharing. So I think it's an opportunity that we've seen to say, look, we can get better at this, and now is the time to do so. And that will have impacts. If we look back to the global crisis, the financial crisis of 2008, studies showed that actually banks that were run that had women on their board were more likely to have been successful and got out of the crisis. So if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Brothers and sisters, maybe it'd have been okay. But it's true. But there's something about that, isn't there, Ivy? There's something about having more female representation at that higher level. And we'll come back to Camilla's point about what you do for yourself, because I think that's a really important point. As an organisation, we have to demonstrate that opportunity is available, because, let me tell you why, a diverse group of people will always be more innovative, creative thought, they'll make you more successful, and that gives the business competitive advantage. And do you know what? When I'm coming out of an economic crisis, I would want my business to have the competitive advantage to succeed. So, Ivy.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build on a couple of points here. So I think you're right that everyone works hopefully for an organization that can be supportive. But I think Camilla's point is really well taken, that ultimately we can only, sometimes you have to focus on what you can control or what you can shape. And all of us joining this discussion can shape our own careers and our own paths. And it's incumbent upon us, I think, as women, to really take a sense of ownership and drive your career in a way that hopefully reflects your interests, your passions, what you're good at. And I really do agree with Camilla that, taking a chance to have variation in your background does make a difference. If you're on the functional side of the business, taking a chance to do a P&L role where you're really learning how to drive revenue generation roles can really shape your career very differently. And that doesn't mean you have to stay in one of those roles if you're not passionate about it. But I think it does give you a variation. I took a risk moving from a functional group to also be on the business side. And I think I would not have the current opportunity that I have, but also, frankly, the mindset that you gain when you're on the revenue side, I think anchors you more and really sets you up, I think, for success. So I really like this idea of taking a risk, but really also being okay about shifting within your company. If you don't want to take the risk outside your company, which, by the way, I still think it's a good idea, taking a risk even and shifting within your own environment.
Yeah, if I may say so, I think when you're shifting line of business, you should do it in a company where you have built a profile and you have a reputation. Mm-hmm. But if you want to see the salary growth, then you need to change companies, because especially females lose in the battle of getting a salary increase. I can see that as a global manager, that females sit and wait for what they deserve, and a lot of males are very, very aggressive and saying, if I don't get 10% more, I will resign, and that strategy tend to win. So you see females coming in too low, their salary, they actually it's not catching up, they are actually going even more behind, and the only way to really get in front is to change company, I'm sad to say.
Mm-hmm. I think it probably depends on organisations and on individuals. I think there's a lesson to learn that women need to take responsibility and be more vocal for each other. So if you can see another woman as being underpaid, you get vocal for her, even if, or a man, you know, whoever would look at that and say, that is not right. It's not that person on her own to challenge it. And it's for us that work around it to say, we should be challenging this. So I think it's multifactorial, but I would also say, I really appreciate your point on looking to better yourself in different experiences. And my personal experience was, rather than moving jobs, because I was in a nice firm, I'm in a nice firm that I really enjoy, it was more about opening up my mind to stop being institutionalized. And we were all at risk of sitting in the same job and becoming institutionalized, or getting used to behaviors, or just getting used to being paid less, or whatever that may be. So I took on different sort of non-exec roles, and as a younger woman, nobody's going to give me a non-exec role, right? So I tried on areas I was interested in. I got involved in the arts. I got involved in football. I love football, but there was an element where it was getting young women into football through community work, and that was fantastic. But it really expanded my knowledge, my leadership skills, because I was looking at different businesses, different environments. So rather than move jobs, I think that's how I developed myself. And I always encourage people, stop sitting in that little safe comfort zone, because you won't achieve what you want to achieve. And you won't be the successful person that you want to be. Maybe you are at that place, and that's interesting how you define it. But I think that's a really good point about how you can adapt and stretch yourself and have a voice. But it is important that we all have a voice for each other, isn't it, at the same time? In terms of that, and as leading business women yourselves, how do you keep yourself refreshed? How do you bring a fresh approach when you've been in such senior positions for so long?
I have a rule that every 7 years I need to do something, a big change in my life. It could be learn another language, change company, change where I live, but I need to do something that fresh my view. And I've been very, very strict about that. And it's because I'm a very data-oriented person, and I can see that every 7 years, science tends to refresh itself, and what we believe was correct 7 years ago is no longer the truth. So I was just coming from this, if I'm sitting down and just happy with my education and happy with the organization and what they're teaching me, I would get out of fashion. So and I also had some good conversations with my father-in-law, who was a minister and one of the most influences board members in Europe and chair in Europe at his time. And he was really challenging me and saying to me, Camilla, if you want to be as successful in business life as I can feel you want to be, you need to start early on board. So my way into the board was actually from guidance. So he said, start in the schools, start with your kids' schools, because I know how passionate you are about how they are liking their school and what teachers and what they're teaching. So start there, get to know the board language. And when you are feeling that you now understand what is the rule around the board, then you go into. It was Red Cross for me, so I sat 7 years in Red Cross here in Denmark and helped them getting more business oriented. And then my first paid board position came, and now I have more than 15 years in insurance companies. So again, I think staying fresh is a personal obligation. And just because you had a really great education when you were a young one, that's not enough. You need to stress what you are doing. You need to stress yourself at least every 7 years.
Ivy, what about you? And keeping yourself fresh.
Yeah, so I think, I have a similar philosophy, but mine has been more about, the way I've lived is I've really been nomadic. I was born and raised in Uganda, but left Uganda when I was about 17. I lived in the UK for a little while for further education, moved to Canada, moved to the US, moved to Bermuda. I feel like there's something to be said about how your mind develops and how your behaviors develop when you live outside your own country. Because I think everyone's country teaches them the norms and behaviors that are acceptable in country. And I think you get sharpened very differently actually when you have to live outside your own country. Now, again, it's not for everyone. I get it. And not everybody actually wants to even venture outside their own borders. But it's just the way I've developed. I think it has helped me understand issues from a varied perspective. So often if somebody is asserting one position, in the back of my mind, I know there are probably 7 other angles to that position, right? I think it helps me in how I approach business. The other thing that I would say is, when we are it's the point that Camilla was making about remaining relevant or remaining current. I think there's a big thing about really trying to remain relevant in work. So I try to read a lot of, there's always going to be some reading material or in my reading list for me. But I think I try to read a little differently. When we were in university, you had the discipline of always looking at who had written the paper that you had referenced. So I think in university, we're trained to really look at reference material before you start connecting the dots. And I think when you leave that environment of that, you lose the discipline of forcing your mind to listen to very different opinions, even opinions you do not respect or people you want to discount. So one of the tricks I do is, even if I have a favorable view of an issue, I will deliberately find somebody who has a very counter view of the same issue. It makes you, I think, a better thinker when you actually can understand the opposite side of your argument as well. Look, I think part of what I will also say for women, it's the difficulty of finding time. And I think this is a very unique problem, not unique to women only, but I think women in particular, you're so busy trying to care for a lot of people. I will say the discipline to be, to take time alone as a woman is actually a skill, right? So when I had my children, I was getting overwhelmed, and I realized that I wasn't just even as good as a parent to them if I wasn't taking time for myself. So I would literally escape my children once in a while, and they would cry about it and feel like I wasn't being fair to them. But I think there's something to be said for finding silence and finding a place where you can really listen to your own voice as a woman, because I think we're often caring for other people, and sometimes we can't distinguish between the needs of others and our own needs. So I would say finding silence, I think, is a key discipline on trying to remain.
It's such a good point. Yeah, it's such a good point, Ivy, because first of all, the reading is a really good suggestion, and I've tried to do that, but I'm so busy. But I found I do audiobooks.
Yes.
So I've just done forgive me, I can't remember a name, but one of the directors of Netflix, it's called Powerful. And I did that on an audiobook, so I could be driving and multitasking and doing things, maybe cooking dinner. But I could just put my earphones on and zone out and listen to that, or put it on when I'm going for a run. And that's a really good piece of advice. And it really helped me, because I zoned out of all of the thought as well. Just an audiobook really worked for me. But the other thing I tried, I have this phrase that all my colleagues will be smiling because they hear me say it all the time, but is walking in other people's shoes. And that keeps me fresh. So particularly through COVID-19, I haven't got children. I wasn't blessed with them. So I took the time to imagine what it was like to be a person in that situation and walk around in their shoes for half an hour and imagine life and what that challenge must be. And I think that gave me a fresh perspective. I thought about the young person that was struggling because they didn't have space in their house to work from home. and the anxiety that causes, and sat again and thought, what can we do? And I think it's a great foundation of any situation to keep yourself fresh, to have the ability, and Ivy, I think you do that by having debates with people who have a counter view to you. I sometimes maybe do that counter view on my own by just using people's lives and imagining what it would be to be in that life. Mm-hmm. And I ask people to do the same with me and say, hang on, just step into my shoes for a minute. What would you do? This is not easy. Mm-hmm. And I find that we all treat each other with kindness when we do that. We're much kinder to each other. We're more understanding when we've taken the time to understand and imagine. And that's what I ask colleagues as a woman, and as a gay woman as I am, to say sometimes just try and stand in my shoes and then look back at what you've just said and imagine, interpret what that feels like. And people often don't mean, there's the unconscious bias in everyone against women, against Black people, against, LGBT, whatever that may be. But often it's because we need to go through a process. And walk in my shoes is a bit of a phrase, but I'll tell you what, it works. Every time it's worked for me to help me make the right decisions at the right time. And when people perhaps behave inappropriately, rather than shout at them or leave the room and say nothing, I do actually suggest they just go and walk around in my shoes for 10 minutes, and then when they calm down, come back and speak to me again. And every single time it seems to sort the matter out. So a little tip there on walking, go away for 10 minutes, walk in my shoes, come back and then say that to me again. And it's always different. And if it's not, you can talk through it. So I think that probably leads us on to the point that I think you've both drilled down to, is about every woman and man and whoever you are has to be their authentic self. And I think that word's used a lot. Without people understanding the true meaning. Camilla, what does authenticity mean to you, and how have you used that in your business life?
I mean, I have always insisted on being extremely feminine. So you don't see me in a suit. I always go in dresses. I love dresses. So that's and then humor for me is I can sit in 12 hours meetings. So for me, it's important that we can laugh sometimes. So for me, it's about bringing the full person, the full Camilla into work, and I don't leave half of myself outside. So that means I laugh, and I do it long and hard, and then I get back to business. And I think that when you dare to use yourself, you're 100%, you also make a better climate in the business. And in the same time, all that you just said before, this is why it's so important that we are a diverse community in the board or in the management or in the company, because the more angles, the more authentic people there's in the business, the better decision we take, because we then get to look at all the angles. Larry Ellison, I worked for, he had a say, I don't need 20 men from the same 3 famous schools in US in my board, because I know when the first person has spoken, the next comment will follow that. And if you dare to have different cultures, different the true diverse management, you get a totally different company. I tried it, and I'm sitting in a board where there are more than one female. Oh my God, a difference that makes, because suddenly I'm not the majority. Now we can actually, there's more than one.
And that's really important. And Ivy, for authenticity for you, what does that mean? How's that played out in your career?
Yeah, so I think it's a critical aspect, I think, of just being, I think, a leader is if, to the extent that you can be yourself, I do think it does cast that same shadow on your organization. It allows people to come to work, frankly, be who they are. Now, I think it's not always easy, though, to be authentic, right? So let's I think there are a couple of thoughts that come to mind, right? If you're playing as a woman in a predominantly male team, I think most women will find those environments difficult over time because, the jokes may not even be things you want to kind of, participate in. So the dominant group often will have a way of interacting that has an impact on the people that are not part of that dominant group. Certainly as a Black female, I think it's something that I struggle with because I'm always outnumbered. I'm always like one of like maybe two people. Sometimes I'm the only Black person in a room constantly. And I think what I would say is it's hard to be truly authentic in those environments, right? Because I have to figure out a way to give the group what they need in a way that hopefully doesn't take away too much from who I am. But I would say that it's a struggle the higher you get in your career. And I think it takes courage to really sit in your skin and be who you are all the time. I think you sometimes have to give and take a little in this regard. The one thing that, I think, you have to question for yourself individually, and all of us have a different answer for it. There are some things I care about more than others, and I think all of us would say the same thing, right? So there are issues about my identity. There are issues about me being a mother. So there are some things I'm not willing to compromise, right? I think you have to be clear about the things that are so central to who you are that if they're tampered with, you really become something else. The reason I seek to be authentic, frankly, is because it's hard to sustain success if you're playing somebody else. I just don't think you can really do this very successfully. I mean, over time, it has a weight on you. It actually does for a lot of Black people and people from different ethnicities in white-dominated environments. There's a lot of stress that we carry privately because you're always trying to accommodate how the other person is, their jokes, the way they talk, and the way you talk is always trying to fit into those environments. So I think that the burden of stress and mental health can be very high for people not being authentic. But I also think over time, it's just very difficult to be successful truly if you're not in your skin. So it's a gift we want hopefully every woman to have, is to have their own, their full authenticity in their business teams and as a leader.
I think that's a really good point, Ivy. I learned the hard way, right? If you try and pretend to be somebody else, most people know you're pretending, right? So they don't trust you, because if somebody's being fake to you now, you have to say, I don't trust you. So if you're going to be a successful businesswoman and you want to be a business leader and people don't trust you, well, it's the end game. And when I first started in my career, it was in the 1990s, right? So the first day I went to my job as a trainee, all the men were taken to the pub and I was given a letter to tell me what to wear. I wasn't allowed to wear trousers. So, Camilla, I'm the opposite of you. I was jeans and T-shirts. I am not a dress girl. Never was. So you can imagine, I was given what I had the boys learned, but I was told how I had to behave, what I'd wear. And so I started in this job. I didn't have a skirt or a dress, right? Just didn't even have it in my repertoire. So I went out and sadly went with my father, who had a bit of a crush on Princess Diana at the time. So I went to work in all these ridiculous clothes, big gold buttons and big ruffles. I was not me at all. I couldn't even walk in a skirt. Right? I'd never even practiced it. I didn't know the etiquette of being ladylike, as my father kept on saying. So it was a real learning curve. So I pretended to be this person. So that was just being a woman, right? Then I was a gay woman. So I couldn't tell them that. I wouldn't ever have had a career. Just no way. Not in the 90s. It would have been over. Mm-hmm. So I invented a boyfriend, because I wanted to fit in. So I pretended to be this glamorous woman in these short skirts and what have you, with makeup. It's totally not me, and with an invented boyfriend, but I'm a terrible liar, right, Ivy? Terrible liar. So I made up a boyfriend, but I kept on forgetting his name. So I kept on having a different one every week, and they thought I was a complete tart. You know, they thought I was going out there with every guy saying, God, Suzanne's really keen on the men, nothing further than the truth. And I realised it was just a web of lies. And the day I left that job, probably, and went somewhere else, I decided from now on, I have to bring Suzanne into the room, like me or not, because I can't carry on with the stress of lying. And that was the moment, the tipping point of my career from being where I was going, which would have been one direction. It gave me all the opportunities because I felt released. It was like a liberation. And actually, I found that everybody quite liked me being me. They didn't want me to be a pretend. And I found that the best thing. So for me, authenticity, and now as sort of a leader in my profession of a big organisation, I might be very unusual, but I'm happy with that. You know, that it's me, but people can trust me to be me. And I think that COVID-19 has also allowed us, let's take all the positives, right? I'm a positive woman always. Mm-hmm. It's allowed us all to be authentic because I'm presenting to all my colleagues. You know, after a few months of lockdown, my hair was huge, right? It was absolutely huge. We're on video. My dogs were all over me. You know, I was in my own home. And everybody else had to be their authentic themselves. You know, you couldn't hide behind suits and clothes and officers because we were all in different places. And I found that so refreshing and so leveling for all of us that we were all in the same boat. Nobody was different. That the authenticity, I really want to keep going because I think we've all just dropped down guards and allowed ourselves to be ourselves. And I think the best successful businesses are run and embrace authentic people. We have got some questions. I am going to have to look at my phone because my eyesight's horrific. I apologise. Okay, the first question, Camilla, a question to Camilla. How can you encourage more women to take chances and leave their comfort zone? How are you going to encourage women to do that? How can we bring people on?
I mean, I can tell you what happened for me with Safra, who said, take a chance. If you don't like it in a year, you can go back. So I think that female may need more safety lines. So this is us being leaders. When we see someone who is extremely talented and successful, but they tend to take the safe route, we should poke them a little bit and we should give them a safety line. So taking a chance, because the first chance is always the worst. And then when you start seeing you be successful, you may dare to do it yourself. Is that an answer to your question?
It is indeed. And Ivy, you know, you must have taken yourself out of your comfort zone so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean,
how did you motivate yourself to do that? It's not easy, is it, just to take that leap?
You know, it's I think it's definitely an individual thing, but I really do agree that in organizations we need to take more chances to push women a little. I call it nudging, right? Like I think, you know, you need a nudge sometimes for somebody to say, no, I think you should, right? I think you should try. Because I think women are more risk averse in putting themselves out there. I think women worry about what other people are going to think about their performance. They worry so much more if they will fail in a position. And I think the one thing I would say, even when you fail at something, you're learning something. You know, I think you sometimes need to do something that, to me, scares you enough. I think that's the way I've managed my own career. Is, am I waking up really feeling good enough or anxious enough to learn and to feel like I'm yearning? If something is too complacent, you're pretty much just treading in place. If you can do the job without thinking and you're what we call you're automatically competent, then you're really not challenging yourself. Often the right opportunity makes you slightly nervous, which is a good thing because it's heightening your attention to what you're reading or what you're doing in front of you. And I think over time, we just need to get people to test themselves. Am I complacent? Am I just doing the same thing? Where can I actually get a job that gives me a little bit of a push?
Yeah, I think it's the combination of fear, isn't it? Oh, the unknown. I'm a bit nervous of doing that. I'm okay where I am. and I might not be able to pedal back. I would say that you've got to use that. You've got to find that adrenaline. If you want to enjoy your career and be the best version of yourself, you need to take some risk to get that adrenaline to push you forward, and you'll feel that reward so much more than if you just go through the motions every day. One day you come back and say, why have I done that? What have I achieved? I also think as men and women in organisations, we can identify with people with potential and help them take the risk. So if I find somebody in my organisation I see real talent, I won't scared. If they're scared, I'll reach out and hold their hand and pull them towards success. And that's all about us all taking the time to look around you and find those people that probably need that hand to pull them towards the successful person they can be. Because if you've got somebody holding your hand, it's a little bit easier. If you've got somebody watching your back, it's a little bit easier. And I think as women, we should empower ourselves to help other women do that. And I always say women shouldn't be fighting for the one seat at the table with each other. They should be getting together to battle for more seats. And if the board says there's not enough seats, then I will say buy a bigger table. And take to the conversations, right?
But sometimes I think that the thing I would add on, Suzanne, is sometimes it's not just waiting for the role. Because I think if you leave your career waiting for the next role, you will be disappointed because sometimes the roles don't come in enough. What I do know is companies love problem solvers and companies are filled with problems, right? So if you want to really push your career out, look around your company and try to solve a bigger problem for them. I think that's one of the things that really can shape your career, and it gives you a work record. We never forget when people do solve a major problem for us. So be one of those people that really is looking for where is the company struggling, where do we have problems, and go to those spaces. Most people in companies avoid problem spaces because they don't want to be bothered with a headache. But problem spaces actually shape careers.
That's about creating your own destiny as well. I still go back to the same thing, that you've got to find something within yourself. And any women that are listening to this now, please go after this and think, I'm going to change. If you're sat feeling on a treadmill saying, what am I going to change? And you're right, Ivy. One of the things you can say is, I can put myself forward and say, I see that problem. I'm creative. I've got an idea how to solve it. Go and knock on the door and explain how you can do that. And Camilla, you must see that around you in the environments you've worked in over the years with so much experience, that when people do that, they can shine and flourish, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I have always been attracted to organizations where people can raise their hand and ask to do something and find support from the management and capital, because they are just so much more savvy than organization where you have to go to your leader and the leader have to say yes or no, and most initiative will stop there. Right. Because he will not, he or she, most likely, he will not see why this is important. So I like fluent organizations. That's where I tend to spend my time.
And Ivy, I've got a question here saying, how have you reached your level of success given the gender gap in leadership? You know, did you have to do anything particular beyond what we've talked about to be successful?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm so glad I got the question, because the one thing that really made a difference for me is I got a sponsor at a very young age. So we talk about mentoring. Mentoring is somebody who helps you, gives you career advice. A sponsor is somebody powerful and somebody who has influence, who is willing to back you and ensure your career trajectory. And Suzanne, I was probably in my late 20s, and I just remembered looking at and observing around me that people who were fairly equally intelligent than me were being given more opportunity, most of them men. And I figured, if I wasn't going to disrupt my career at that point, I would be left behind. I was at a cocktail party and I approached a very senior leader in our industry. And I just put my hand out. I said, you don't know who I am. This is who I am. But I feel that I could do things for this company. and I would really like you to consider me. He was very shocked. I don't think he knew how to respond. I said to him, please don't respond immediately. Check around, go back to the people who you work with. If they tell you I am a useless worker, I will not be offended. But if you hear something good, I would really appreciate a follow-up. The next day, his secretary called me up. Literally, this man supported me when I had no, very long work record, but he took a chance. I think he saw something. But here's the key point is I pushed myself, I imposed myself on him. That's the truth.
Well, my view on that is he didn't see something, you made him see it.
It's so funny that your story is so similar to mine, because I was at a Christmas party with my husband and I just wanted to work in the IT industry, and IBM was so high on my list, and the CEO was there. So I went over to him and I heard him saying, we cannot attract any youth to IBM Denmark. And I said to him, I'm so sad to hear that, because I like to be hired. And he was so shocked that I was standing there. I was in the beginning of the 20s, and I was saying, I want to work for IBM, hire me. And I got a call, not the next day, but 3 days later, and my first position out of business school was IBM. But again, that was because I dared to go over to the man who was the head of the organization. That was my dream job.
Yeah.
Well, that's important, isn't it? Because what we take from that, and you're two very strong women, and some people probably don't have the confidence that you have. But to try and move forward, find a sponsor, get somebody, the hand I was talking out that reaches and pulls you there. Find that person, but you have to have courage. You were both courageous. You probably weren't that confident back then, but you saw something and you wanted it, and you had a bit of courage to say, I want to change my life because I want to do what's appropriate for me to be successful. And we always have that conversation as women, don't we? What's successful? Is successful doing a man's job and looking like a man? No, it isn't. I always say successful is two things. It's achieving your full potential and being happy. If you achieve your potential and you are happy, then you are a very successful person, irrespective of title, of pay, or whatever. But you've got to have some courage to find that happiness. And I think, that explains it really well. Just on a final point, we've got one more question, just bear with me, or it's a generic one really for you to wrap up, which seems really appropriate. But between us, can we share one piece of advice for the women and the men on this call that they can take away with them and use to help them be a better version of themselves? Camilla.
I would say I would be very close to what Ivy was saying, and I'm saying challenge yourself. So if you are very comfortable in an opinion or in the state of science, be curious of what the other side is saying. And if you dare challenge all that you take for granted, you will find a better life, better happiness, better career, in my opinion. So be curious. Don't get stuck in what you think is the truth.
I think curious is good. Ivy.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that the global pandemic has pointed out to me, is just how precious life is and how fragile it is. And so I would just say there's no second round. This is it, right? Have a sense of urgency to do the things that matter to you, that matter to the ones you love. And I think if we all lived with this idea that there's one round and this is just a very short and precious time, we would probably do a couple of things a little differently. So I think, to me, hold your life with conviction and try to do the things that really truly matter to you, because there's no second round and there's no other person like you. It's something to really keep in mind.
I think that's really important, Ivy. But how do you challenge then the people that try and undermine that, the bad behaviour? How do you go around challenging that? Because it's great for us to say, go and do that. And Camilla, you can perhaps touch on this as well. It's great to be those things, but how do we deal with somebody challenging back on that, or, demonstrating really bad, undermining behaviour? Dare I even say I've encountered bullying behaviour. Tried to stop me taking that course.
I actually think you have to start another place, because if you're in an environment where a bully has the power, it's because a lot of people was standing back. So when you see people being very challenging on an unfair ground or very bullying, you need to stand up for the person that is facing that challenge. Because then you will create an environment where next time you take a chance and you put out an idea that is not common, and people will listen because you stood up for other people that had the same situation. So I think you have to start by giving the good life to other people, and then the good life come back to you. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense to me. It makes total sense to me. I mean, I think organizations are a collective of individuals, right? So every action I take impacts the person on my team, and actions they take impact me. So I really think there's a power in being a witness. There's a power in being the bystander. It is easier to obviously turn away. It's easier to laugh uncomfortably and change the subject. It's harder to actually say, you can't do that on this team. We won't accept that behavior, right? So I really think that we can all help by being that person, a little bit like Camilla said, to provide the cover for another person, because sometimes that person can't speak up. So I really would say be an active bystander. Don't just be a passive bystander.
I think that message has come out louder and clear, particularly over the Black Lives Matter. I've seen a shift in people having the confidence to say more and have difficult conversations. It's okay to have difficult conversations, isn't it? Let's start having difficult conversations, because we tackle the issues that are not talked about, are hidden under carpet. And if I look back to my younger self, I came across a few bullies in my time, and they battered me to the ground. When I look back, I wish somebody had reached out and grabbed me, but maybe I didn't tell people. So I always say, if you're having a difficult time, find a safe place to go. We've created some hubs and some, for example, as it is diving, D&I hubs. If you've got challenges, there's somewhere to go to, there's somebody to talk to, and use those opportunities. But I think it's really important in terms of, I think I've got 1 minute, so perhaps wrapping up, to say, curiosity is really important for everyone. This isn't just for the diverse minorities or for women, it's for everyone. Curiosity with courage and confidence. And within that, you've got to be seen and heard. You've got to make sure that you are seen and heard, whether it's the Camilla Ivy approach of saying, I love that job, I want that job, hire me, or whatever you want to be heard about. I think it's really important to take away from this that we all learn to champion each other better, to spot the people that need that hand up, stop focusing just on ourselves, but to walk in other people's shoes and say, how can I help you too? Because if we all help each other and create a more diverse network of people in our organisations, we are going to have the competitive advantage. I think that in terms of women, we have to take responsibility to demand, more seats at that table, but work with each other, but also work each other as allies. Allies across the board with each other, men to be our allies, allies to our colleagues, whatever background they're from. And I think from that, we stand a good future, don't we? I think, Camilla, the world could be our oyster if we try to employ all those behaviours. So on that note, I believe that our hour is up. I thank everybody for taking part, and I hope you all keep well and safe and enjoy the rest of the Diving Festival. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.